The sound of her laughter carried across the creek that summer afternoon in 1851. And Isaac Anders knew with the certainty of a 9-year-old boy that he would protect Molly Abbott for the rest of his life. She was only 8 then, her brown hair tangled with wildflowers as she waded through the shallow water. And when Tommy Fletcher pushed her down and she scraped her knee on the rocks, Isaac had jumped on the bigger boy without thinking twice. His father had tanned his hide for fighting, but when Molly pressed a cool cloth to his swollen eye and whispered, "Thank you," Isaac knew he would do it again in a heartbeat. Hamilton, Nevada was barely a town back then, just a scattering of wooden buildings and canvas tents clinging to the eastern slopes of the Toyabe Range. Silver had been discovered in the mountains, and folks had come rushing in with dreams of fortune. But most found only backbreaking work and dust. Isaac's father had a claim that produced just enough to keep them fed, while Molly's father ran the general store and her mother took in washing. They were neighbors by necessity in that harsh landscape, and their children became inseparable by choice. The years passed the way they do in childhood, each season stretching endlessly and yet somehow flying by. Isaac grew tall and strong from working the claim, his shoulders broadening and his hands becoming calloused before he turned 15. Molly blossomed into a beauty that made every prospector tip his hat when she walked by, her dark eyes warm and her smile quick. But she only ever had eyes for Isaac, and everyone in Hamilton knew it. They would meet by the creek whenever they could, talking about everything and nothing. Molly told him her dreams of having a real house someday, with glass windows and a proper kitchen. Isaac told her about the mountains, about the high country where he went hunting with his father, where the aspens turned gold in autumn and the silence was so complete you could hear your own heartbeat. "I am going to build you that house," Isaac promised her one evening when they were both 17. They sat on the bank watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. Up in the high country where the air is clean, big windows facing west so you can watch the sun go down every night. Molly leaned her head against his shoulder, and Isaac felt his heart hammer in his chest. "I do not need a fancy house, Isaac Anders. I just need you." He turned to look at her then, really look at her, and saw not the little girl he had protected, but the woman he wanted to spend his life with. "Molly Abbott, I swear to you right now, I am going to make sure nothing bad ever happens to you. I am going to take care of you and protect you and love you until the day I die." She lifted her face to his, and he kissed her for the first time as the Nevada sky blazed above them. It was clumsy and sweet and perfect, and when they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "I love you too," she whispered. "I always have." That should have been the beginning of their story together. Isaac planned to talk to her father, to ask permission to court her properly. He was young, but he was a hard worker, and he had been saving money from his work at the claim. In another year, maybe 2, he would have enough to buy some land and start building that house he had promised her. But then Fort Sumter happened. The news reached Hamilton weeks late, as news always did. But when it came, it changed everything. The nation was at war with itself, brother against brother, and Nevada Territory was calling for volunteers to join the Union cause. Isaac was 18 years old and full of ideals about duty and honor. His father had fought in the Mexican War and had raised him to believe a man stood up when his country called. But when he told Molly he was going to enlist, her face went pale. "Please do not go," she begged him, gripping his hand so tight her knuckles went white. "Let someone else fight this war. Stay here with me." "I have to go, Molly. Men are needed. I cannot sit here safe in the mountains while others are dying for the Union." "Then I will wait," she said fiercely. "However long it takes, Isaac Anders. I will wait for you. Just promise me you will come back." He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, memorizing the feel of her in his arms. "I promise. I swear to you, Molly, I will come back. And when I do, we are getting married that same day, if you will have me." "I will have you," she said through her tears. "I will always have you." They had one more week together before he left. Isaac spent every possible moment with Molly, stealing kisses behind the general store and walking with her in the mountains. On his last night in Hamilton, they sat by their creek under a full moon, and Isaac gave her a ring he had hammered himself from a silver nugget. "It is not much," he said as he slipped it onto her finger, "but it is a promise. I am coming back to you, Molly. Wait for me." "I would wait forever," she told him. Isaac left Hamilton in the spring of 1862 with 12 other young men from the territory. They joined up with California volunteers and were formed into cavalry units. Isaac had grown up riding horses and handling rifles in the mountains, and he took to military life easily enough. What he did not take to was being away from Molly. He wrote her letters whenever he could, long, rambling letters about the places he saw and the men he served with and how much he missed her. He told her about the desert heat in Arizona Territory, where they chased Confederate sympathizers, about the taste of dust that never seemed to leave his mouth, about the night sky that reminded him of home. He told her he loved her in every letter, sometimes a dozen times on a single page. Her letters back were his lifeline. She told him about Hamilton, about her work helping her mother, about the small things that made up daily life in the territory. She told him about the wildflowers blooming by their creek, about the first snow in the mountains, about the baby rabbits she found in the garden. She told him she loved him and missed him and was counting the days until he came home. But as the war dragged on, the letters became harder to get. Mail service was irregular at best, and sometimes months would pass between correspondence. Isaac held on to every letter she sent him, reading them until the paper grew soft and the ink began to fade. The silver ring he had given her, he knew, was not enough. He wanted to give her everything she deserved, and the war was keeping him from doing that. The fighting in the territories was not like the great battles happening back east. It was skirmishes with Confederate raiders, long patrols through unforgiving country, and the slow, grinding work of keeping supply lines open. Isaac rose to sergeant through a combination of skill and simply surviving longer than most. Men died from disease and accidents, as often as from bullets, and every night Isaac fell asleep thanking God he was still alive, and one day closer to going home to Molly. He was 22 years old when the war finally ended. 4 years had passed since he left Hamilton, 4 years that felt like a lifetime. The boy who had enlisted full of ideals had become a man hardened by experience, his body all muscle and weathered skin, his hair grown long under his cavalry hat. He had killed men, though he tried not to think about it. He had watched friends die. He had learned that war was not glorious or noble, but simply terrible, and he wanted nothing more than to leave it all behind. The cavalry unit was mustered out in California in the summer of 1865. Isaac took his pay, bought a horse and supplies, and headed straight for Nevada. He did not stop except to rest the horse and sleep a few hours here and there. The mountains called to him, and more than that, Molly called to him. 4 years was too long. 4 years was an eternity. It took him 2 weeks of hard riding to reach Hamilton. The town had grown in his absence, with real buildings replacing some of the tents and canvas structures. The silver mines were still producing, and the population had swelled with miners and merchants and all the hangers-on that followed precious metals. Isaac barely recognized the place as he rode down the main street in the late afternoon sun. But he recognized the general store. It looked exactly the same, and his heart pounded as he dismounted and tied his horse to the rail out front. Through the window, he could see someone moving inside, and he took a deep breath before pushing through the door. An older man stood behind the counter, someone Isaac did not recognize. "Help you?" the man asked. "I am looking for the Abbotts. They used to run this store." The man's expression shifted. "You knew them?" "Knew them." Isaac felt something cold grip his chest. "What happened?" "Cholera outbreak 3 years back. Hit the town hard. Robert Abbott and his wife both died within a week of each other." The world seemed to tilt under Isaac's feet. "And their daughter? Molly? What happened to Molly?" "The daughter survived. Pretty girl, brown hair." "Yes," Isaac said urgently. "Where is she?" "She married. Let me think now. What was his name?" The man scratched his chin. "Garrett. William Garrett. He owns the Lucky Strike mine up in the hills. They live out at his ranch west of town." Isaac heard the words, but could not seem to make sense of them. Married. Molly was married. But she had promised to wait for him. She had said she would wait forever. "You all right, mister?" the storekeeper asked. "You look like you have seen a ghost." "When did she marry him?" Isaac managed to ask. "Oh, about 2 years ago now. Right proper wedding from what I hear." 2 years. 1863. Only a year after Isaac had left. Only a year after she had promised to wait. Isaac walked out of the store in a daze. He stood on the wooden sidewalk staring at the mountains without really seeing them. His whole body felt numb. 4 years he had survived the war. 4 years he had held on to the thought of coming home to Molly, and she had married another man. He should leave. He should get back on his horse and ride away and never look back. But even as he thought it, Isaac knew he could not do that. Not without seeing her. Not without understanding what had happened. He asked around town until he got directions to the Garrett Ranch. It was about 5 miles west of Hamilton, in a valley with good water and grazing land. The sun was setting as Isaac rode up the long drive to a large house built of milled lumber, the kind of house that showed real money. There were barns and corrals and cattle dotting the hillsides. William Garrett had clearly done well for himself. Isaac dismounted in front of the house and stood there for a long moment, trying to gather his courage. Then he climbed the steps and knocked on the door. A middle-aged woman in an apron answered. "Can I help you?" "I am looking for Molly. Molly Abbott. Molly Garrett." The name tasted like ashes in his mouth. "Mrs. Garrett is in the parlor. Who should I say is calling?" "Isaac Anders." The woman's eyes widened slightly. "Wait here." She disappeared back into the house. Isaac stood on the porch, his hands clenched at his sides. He heard voices inside, one of them distinctly female and rising in pitch. Then footsteps approaching, running almost, and the door flew open. Molly stood there. She was more beautiful than he remembered. Her dark hair was pinned up in a style he had never seen her wear, and she wore a dress of deep blue that must have cost more than her father had made in 6 months. But it was her eyes that struck him, those warm brown eyes he had dreamed about for 4 years. They were wide with shock and filling with tears. "Isaac," she whispered. "Hello, Molly. You are alive. You are really alive." She reached out as if to touch him, then pulled her hand back. "They told me you were dead." "What?" "A letter came from the cavalry. It said you were killed in a skirmish in Arizona. It was official, from your commanding officer. I waited and waited for you to write, to tell me it was a mistake. But you never did." Isaac felt the anger that had been building in his chest deflate. "I never died. I do not know anything about a letter. I wrote you, Molly. I wrote you every chance I got." I never received any letters. Not after the one in the fall of 1862. Tears were streaming down her face now. I thought you were dead, Isaac. For 3 years I thought you were dead. I thought you had forgotten me, that you did not want to wait. Forget you? Her voice broke. I could never forget you. You were my whole heart. But you were dead, and my parents were dead, and I had nothing left. When William asked me to marry him, I did not love him. But he was kind, and he offered me security. What else was I supposed to do? Before Isaac could answer, another voice came from inside the house. Molly, who was at the door? A man appeared behind her, tall and well-dressed with thinning hair and a prosperous belly. He put a possessive hand on Molly's shoulder. What is going on here? William, this is Isaac Anders, the boy I grew up with, the one who was reported dead. William's expression hardened. I see. Well, as you can see, she is not dead, and she is married. I think you had better leave. Isaac, please, Molly said, her voice pleading. I am so sorry. I am so sorry. Isaac looked at her, at the tears on her face and the anguish in her eyes. He looked at the ring on her finger, a gold band that replaced the silver one he had made for her. He looked at the man standing behind her, already pulling her back into the house. I am sorry too, Isaac said quietly. Then he turned and walked back to his horse. He rode away from the Garrett ranch as the last light faded from the sky. He rode without thinking about where he was going, letting the horse pick its way along the road back toward Hamilton. His mind was a storm of emotions he could not name. Grief and anger and loss and something like relief all tangled together until he felt like he might choke on them. She had not betrayed him. She had thought he was dead. Someone had made a terrible mistake. Or maybe it had been deliberate. A clerical error that had destroyed both their lives. It did not matter now. The result was the same. Molly was married to another man, and there was nothing Isaac could do about it. He should leave Hamilton, go somewhere else, and start over. He had learned skills in the cavalry that would serve him well. He could scout or guide or find work on a ranch. But the thought of leaving, of never seeing Molly again, was like a knife in his chest. Isaac made camp in the foothills above town, in a spot he remembered from his youth. He built a fire and sat staring into it until the stars wheeled overhead. He had survived 4 years of war, only to come home to this. It seemed like a particularly cruel joke. He was still sitting there when the sun rose. He had not slept at all, and his eyes burned with exhaustion and unshed tears. He needed to make a decision, stay or go, but he could not seem to make his mind work properly. Around mid-morning, he heard a horse approaching. Isaac's hand went automatically to the rifle beside him, old cavalry instincts taking over. But it was only Molly, riding alone, wearing a simple riding dress and with her hair in a braid down her back. She dismounted when she saw him and walked slowly toward his camp. May I sit? Isaac nodded, not trusting his voice. Molly sat down across the fire from him. In the morning light, he could see the toll the years had taken on her. She was still beautiful, but there were shadows under her eyes and a tightness around her mouth that had not been there before. I had to see you again, she said. I could not let you ride away thinking I had stopped loving you. Molly, you do not owe me anything. Yes, I do. I owe you the truth. She twisted her hands in her lap. When the letter came saying you were dead, I wanted to die too. I cried for weeks. I could not eat or sleep. And then the cholera came, and my parents got sick. I nursed them day and night, but they both died within days of each other. I was 18 years old, and I had lost everyone I loved in the space of a month. Isaac wanted to go to her, to hold her, but he stayed where he was. William Garrett came to the funeral. He had always been interested in me, but I had eyes only for you. He was 35 years old, a widower with no children, and he was kind. He offered to let me stay on in the store to work for him. He had bought it after my parents died. I said yes because I had no other choice. And then a few months later, he asked me to marry him. You did not have to say yes, Isaac said, and hated himself for saying it. Did I not? Molly looked up at him with eyes full of pain. I was alone, Isaac. I had no family, no money, nothing. In this territory, a woman alone has very few options. William offered me security and respectability. He said he would take care of me. What was I supposed to do? You were supposed to wait for me, Isaac said, and his voice broke. I thought you were dead, Molly said through her tears. How could I wait for a ghost? They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Isaac asked, Do you love him? No. The answer was immediate and definite. I respect him. I am grateful to him, but I do not love him. I have only ever loved one man, and he is sitting across from me right now. Molly, Isaac said helplessly. I know it does not matter. I made vows, and I will keep them. But I needed you to know. I needed you to understand that I never stopped loving you, not for a single day. She stood then, brushing off her skirt. I should go. William will wonder where I am. Does he know? Isaac asked. Does he know about me? He knows I had a childhood friend who died in the war. He does not know that you were the love of my life. She gave him a sad smile. Goodbye, Isaac. I hope you find happiness somewhere. She mounted her horse and rode away, without looking back. Isaac watched until she disappeared from view, and then he finally let himself cry. He stayed in the mountains for 3 days, wrestling with himself. Every instinct in his body told him to fight for her, to claim what should have been his all along. But Molly was married, and Isaac had been raised to respect the law and propriety. A married woman belonged to her husband, no matter the circumstances. On the 3rd day, he made his decision. He would stay in Hamilton. He could not bear to leave and never see Molly again, even if all he could do was watch her from afar. He would find work, build a life here, and protect her the only way he still could by being nearby if she ever needed him. Isaac rode back into town and inquired about work. His skills from the war made him valuable. He could track, hunt, fight if needed, and he knew the mountains better than most. Within a week, he had hired on as a scout and guide for the mining company that operated several claims in the area. The pay was good, and the work kept him busy and often away in the high country, which suited him fine. He rented a small cabin on the edge of town and settled into a routine. He avoided the places he knew Molly frequented, not trusting himself to see her. Occasionally, he heard news about her around town, that she was well, that she and her husband were prospering. It was both comfort and torture to hear her name. Weeks turned into months. Summer faded into fall, and the aspens on the mountainsides turned gold. Isaac threw himself into his work, taking the most difficult assignments, staying out in the wilderness for days at a time. When he was in the mountains, he could almost pretend that none of it had happened, that he was just a boy again, exploring the high country with no cares beyond what he would have for dinner. It was on one of these trips, in late October, that everything changed. Isaac had been guiding a group of investors through the high country, showing them potential mining sites. They were on their way back to Hamilton when they came across a scene that made Isaac's blood run cold. A wagon was overturned on the side of the trail, and a woman was trying to fight off 3 men who were clearly intent on robbery or worse. Even from a distance, Isaac recognized that dark hair. Molly. He did not think. He spurred his horse forward with a shout that sent the investors scrambling for cover. The three men turned at his approach, and Isaac saw one of them reach for a gun. He was faster. The rifle shot echoed through the canyon, and the man went down. The other two men ran for their horses. Isaac let them go, more concerned with getting to Molly. He was off his horse before it fully stopped, running to where she had fallen. "Molly, are you hurt?" She looked up at him, her face pale and her dress torn. "Isaac?" He helped her to her feet, checking her over for injuries. "Did they hurt you?" "No, you got here in time." She was shaking. They came out of nowhere. The wagon hit a rock and overturned, and William, he hit his head. "I think he is badly hurt." Isaac saw the man pinned under the wagon then. William Garrett was unconscious, blood matting his hair, one leg bent at an unnatural angle. Isaac called to the investors to help, and together they managed to lift the wagon enough to pull William free. "We need to get him to town, to a doctor," Isaac said. William's breathing was shallow, and his face was gray. The leg was clearly broken, and that head wound looked serious. They improvised a travois and loaded William onto it as gently as they could. Molly wanted to ride alongside him, but Isaac made her ride his horse while he walked, leading the travois. It was a 6-hour journey back to Hamilton, and every moment of it, Isaac prayed that William Garrett would survive. He did not want the man dead. God help him, he did not want to win Molly that way. They reached Hamilton well after dark. The doctor was summoned, and William was carried into his house while Molly and Isaac waited in the parlor. The investors had continued on to the hotel, leaving Isaac alone with Molly for the first time since that morning at his camp. "Thank you," she said quietly, "if you had not come along when you did. I will always protect you, Molly, no matter what." She looked at him with eyes full of complicated emotion. "I know." The doctor came out an hour later, looking grim. "He is alive, but it is bad. That leg will need to be set, and there is swelling in his brain from the head injury. The next few days will tell whether he survives." "Can I see him?" Molly asked. "Yes, but he is not conscious." Molly stood, then turned back to Isaac. "Will you wait? Please, I do not want to be alone." Isaac nodded. He would wait forever if she asked him to. She was with William for a long time. Isaac sat in the parlor and listened to the clock tick and tried not to think about what would happen if William died. It made him feel like the worst kind of man. But he could not help the small, shameful part of him that wondered if maybe, just maybe, this was some kind of terrible gift. When Molly came back downstairs, her eyes were red from crying. "He looks so pale. I have never seen him look so helpless. He is a strong man. He might pull through. Maybe." She sat down beside Isaac, closer than was proper. "I am scared, Isaac. I do not know what I will do if he dies. I know that makes me sound terrible because I do not love him the way I should, but he has been good to me. He does not deserve this." "You are not terrible," Isaac said. "You are human." They sat together in silence until the housekeeper came to tell Molly she should rest. Isaac stood to leave, but Molly caught his hand. "Will you come back tomorrow? Check on us?" "Of course." Over the next week, Isaac came by the Garrett house every day. William remained unconscious, his condition unchanging. The doctor set his leg and tended the head wound, but there was nothing more he could do. It was up to William's constitution now, and time. Isaac helped where he could. He chopped firewood and tended the animals and did the heavy work that needed doing around the ranch. Molly protested that he did not need to. that she could hire men to do it, but Isaac insisted. It gave him a purpose and a reason to be near her. They fell into an easy routine, working alongside each other during the day and sitting together in the evenings, while Molly kept vigil by William's bedside. They talked about everything and nothing, carefully avoiding the subject that hung between them like a curtain. They talked about their childhood, about the war, about the years they had lost. They talked about Hamilton and how it had changed, about the mountains and the weather and the price of silver. What they did not talk about was what would happen next. On the 8th day after the attack, William Garrett opened his eyes. Isaac was not there when it happened. He heard about it in town the next morning, and relief flooded through him. William was going to live. He rode out to the ranch immediately, telling himself it was to check on Molly, to make sure she was all right. She met him at the door, and there was something different in her expression. Something sad and resigned. "He is awake," she said. "The doctor says he will recover, though it will be months before he can walk again." "That is good news." "Yes." She did not sound happy about it. "Molly?" She stepped outside and closed the door behind her. "He wants to see you, to thank you for saving his life." Isaac followed her inside and up to the bedroom. William Garrett lay propped up on pillows, his broken leg splinted and his head bandaged. He looked pale and weak, but his eyes were clear. "Anders," William said, his voice raspy. "Molly told me what you did. You saved both our lives. Anyone would have done the same. Maybe not. But it was you who did it, and I owe you a debt." William reached out with a shaking hand and took Molly's. "I know about you two, about your history. Molly told me everything while I was lying here thinking I might die." Isaac glanced at Molly, but she was looking down at her hands. "She told me she was in love with you before I ever courted her," William continued. "That she only married me because she thought you were dead. She told me she still loves you." "William, please," Molly said, but he squeezed her hand. "Let me finish. I am not a young man, Anders, and this accident has made me face some truths. I married Molly because she was beautiful and kind, and I wanted a companion in my old age. But she deserves more than that. She deserves to be with someone she loves." Isaac felt his heart start to pound. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I will give her a divorce. It will cause a scandal, but I have enough money and influence to weather it. Molly will be taken care of financially. I will make sure of that. And you two can be together, the way you should have been all along." "No," Molly said firmly. "William, I cannot let you do this. You have been good to me. I made vows, and I will keep them. Even though you do not love me?" "You deserve a wife who loves you," Molly said. "I am sorry I could not be that for you. But divorce? The shame of it will follow us all for the rest of our lives." "I do not care about shame," William said. "I care about doing what is right. And keeping you tied to me when your heart belongs to another man is not right." Isaac listened to them argue back and forth, his mind reeling. A divorce? It was almost unheard of, especially in a small town like Hamilton. Molly was right that it would cause a scandal. But William seemed determined, and Isaac could not deny the hope rising in his chest. In the end, it was Isaac who made the decision. "No," he said. Both William and Molly turned to look at him in surprise. "No," William said. "I appreciate what you are offering," Isaac said carefully. "More than you know. But Molly is right. A divorce would destroy her reputation. People would talk about her for the rest of her life. I cannot let that happen. I will not be the cause of that kind of shame for her. Isaac, Molly whispered. I love you, Isaac said to her. I have loved you since we were children, and I will love you until I die. But I love you too much to ruin your life. You are a married woman, and you will stay that way. He turned and walked out of the house before either of them could stop him. Isaac rode straight back to the mountains. He took nothing with him except his rifle and his horse and the clothes on his back. He rode until he reached the high country, the places he had explored as a boy, and he kept going until he found a meadow he remembered, one with good water and shelter and game. He would become what the war and his broken heart had made him. A mountain man, someone who lived apart from civilization and its complications. He would trap and hunt and survive, and he would try to forget that down in the valley below was the woman he would love forever and could never have. Winter came early that year. Snow began falling in November, and by December, the high country was locked in white. Isaac built himself a rough cabin using techniques he had learned from trappers during the war. It was small and drafty, but it kept out the worst of the cold. He set his trap lines and hunted elk for meat and tried to fill his days with enough work that he fell into bed exhausted each night. But no amount of exhaustion could keep him from dreaming of Molly. The winter was long and brutal. There were days when the snow fell so thick Isaac could not see his hand in front of his face. There were nights when the cold was so intense that the trees cracked like gunshots. Isaac survived because he was stubborn and skilled, and because some part of him was not yet ready to give up on life entirely. When spring finally came, melting the snow and revealing the green beneath, Isaac remained in his cabin. He had supplies and solitude, and that was enough. Or so he told himself. He was checking his traps one morning in late April when he heard a horse approaching. Isaac's hand went to his rifle, but it was only a rider from town, a young man who worked at the general store. Been looking for you for 2 days, the rider said out of breath. Message from Mrs. Garrett. She needs you to come to town. Says it is urgent. Isaac felt his stomach drop. Is she hurt? Not hurt, but something is wrong. She would not say what. Just that you needed to come right away. Isaac packed up his camp in a matter of minutes. He followed the rider back down the mountain, his heart pounding the entire way. It took them most of the day to reach Hamilton, and Isaac rode straight to the Garrett house. Molly opened the door before he could knock. She looked thinner than he remembered, with dark circles under her eyes. But she was still beautiful, still the woman he loved with every breath in his body. Thank God you came, she said. I was afraid you would not. What is wrong? What happened? Come inside. Isaac followed her into the parlor. William Garrett sat in a wheelchair near the window. He had recovered from his injuries, but the broken leg had not healed properly, and the doctor said he would never walk again. He looked older than his years, his face lined with pain and weariness. Anders, William said. Thank you for coming. What is this about? Molly twisted her hands together. William wants to talk to you about his offer from before, about the divorce. I told you my answer. Hear me out, William said. These past months have given me a lot of time to think about my life, about what I want from the years I have left. I married Molly thinking she would be a companion to me, but instead I have made her a prisoner. She takes care of me out of duty, not love. She smiles during the day and cries at night when she thinks I cannot hear. This is no life for either of us. William, please, Molly said. I have made my decision, William said firmly. I am giving you a divorce, Molly. whether you want it or not. I have already spoken to a lawyer. The papers will be filed next week. I will say the marriage was never consummated due to my injury, which makes it grounds for annulment rather than divorce. Your reputation will be preserved as much as possible. But your reputation, Molly protested, will survive. I am a rich man with powerful friends. People will whisper for a while, and then they will find something else to talk about. William looked at Isaac. I am doing this because it is the right thing to do, but also because I owe you my life. This is how I repay that debt. Isaac looked at Molly, who had tears streaming down her face. He looked at William, who met his gaze with quiet dignity, and he made his decision. If you are sure this is what you want, Isaac said slowly, then I accept. And I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life making Molly happy and taking care of her the way she deserves. That is all I ask, William said. The annulment proceedings took 6 weeks. It was every bit as scandalous as Molly had feared. People talked and whispered and judged. The story spread through Hamilton like wildfire. The rich mine owner setting aside his beautiful young wife. The childhood sweetheart returned from the dead, the impropriety of it all. But William had been right. He had enough money and influence to weather the storm. And Isaac discovered he did not care what people said, as long as Molly was by his side. They were married on a Sunday morning in June of 1866, in a simple ceremony by the creek where Isaac had first promised to protect her all those years ago. There were only a handful of witnesses, a friendly judge, the doctor who had treated William, and a few of Isaac's friends from the mining company. Molly wore a simple white dress, and Isaac wore his best shirt and the pants he had been married in the cavalry. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac pulled Molly into his arms and kissed her the way he had been dreaming of for 5 long years. I love you, Molly Anders, he said when they finally broke apart. I love you too, she said, laughing and crying at the same time. I always have, and I always will. They moved into a small house on the edge of town that Isaac had bought with his savings from working as a guide. It was not much, just 2 rooms and a lean-to kitchen, but it was theirs. At night, they would lie in bed wrapped in each other's arms, making up for all the years they had lost. Tell me about the war, Molly would say, tracing her fingers over the scars on his chest. Tell me about when you thought I was dead, Isaac would counter. They shared their pain and their grief, all the things they had endured separately, and in sharing them, they began to heal. They made love with a passion born of years of longing, and they talked until the candles burned low, learning each other all over again. Isaac went back to work as a guide, but now he came home to Molly every night. She took in sewing and helped out at the new general store that had opened in town. They were not rich, but they were happy in a way that made wealth seem meaningless. That first summer of their marriage was golden. They would pack a picnic and ride out to their creek, where they would swim and make love in the grass and watch the clouds drift by overhead. They would walk in the mountains in the evening, when the air was cool and the light turned everything soft and beautiful. They would sit on their porch and watch the stars come out, Molly nestled against Isaac's chest, and talk about their future. I want children, Molly said one night. Lots of them, a whole house full. Then we better get started, Isaac said, and carried her inside to their bed. Molly became pregnant that fall. Isaac was overjoyed, fussing over her and treating her like she was made of glass. Molly tolerated it with good humor, though she insisted she was perfectly capable of doing her normal work. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, she reminded him when he tried to stop her from lifting a basket of laundry. "I am not going to break." But Isaac could not help himself. He had waited so long for this, for her, and now that he had it, he was terrified something would go wrong. He worked extra hours to save money for the baby, and he started building an addition onto their house to make more room. William Garrett came to visit one afternoon while Isaac was working on the addition. He was in his wheelchair, pushed by his housekeeper, and he looked better than he had in months. He had gained some weight back, and there was color in his face. "Heard congratulations are in order," William said. Isaac climbed down from the roof where he had been working. "Thank you for everything." "How is she?" "She's wonderful, happy. She glows." William smiled. "Good. That is good." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I want you to know I am leaving Hamilton, moving back east to live with my sister in Philadelphia. The altitude here is hard on me, and the doctors say the lower elevation might help with my recovery." "When do you leave?" "Next month. I wanted to say goodbye before I go, and to tell you that I have no regrets about what I did. Seeing Molly happy makes it all worthwhile." Isaac held out his hand, and William shook it. "You are a good man, William Garrett. Better than most. I hope you find happiness too." "Maybe I will. Maybe it is not too late for an old fool like me." William looked around at the half-built addition. "You are building her that house you promised, are you not? The one with the big windows facing west?" "How did you know about that?" "She told me once, in a moment of weakness. Said her childhood friend had promised to build her a house in the mountains." William smiled. "Make sure those windows are big, Anders. She deserves to watch every sunset for the rest of her life." William left Hamilton 3 weeks later. Isaac and Molly went to see him off at the stage station. Molly cried and hugged him, thanking him for his kindness and his sacrifice. William just patted her hand and told her to be happy. As the stage pulled away, Molly leaned against Isaac and said, "He was a good man. I hope he knows that." "I think he does," Isaac said. The baby came in early May of 1867, after a long and difficult labor that left Isaac pacing the floor and praying to every god he could think of. When the midwife finally emerged and told him he had a son, Isaac broke down and cried with relief. Molly was exhausted but radiant when he entered their bedroom. She held a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket, and when she pulled the cloth back, Isaac saw a red-faced infant with a shock of dark hair. "Meet your son," Molly said. "I was thinking we could name him Robert, after my father." Isaac touched the baby's impossibly small hand, and his son gripped his finger with surprising strength. "Robert Isaac Anders. It is perfect." Being a father changed Isaac in ways he had not expected. The fierce protective instinct he had always felt for Molly extended to their son, multiplied 100-fold. He would watch Robert sleep and feel his chest tighten with love so intense it was almost painful. They settled into the rhythms of parenthood. Sleepless nights and the smell of milk and baby powder. The wonder of watching Robert discover the world, every small milestone a cause for celebration. Isaac built a cradle from pine wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. Molly sewed clothes and sang lullabies in the evening light. Hamilton continued to grow around them. More mines opened in the mountains, and the population swelled. The town got a proper church and a school, and even a newspaper. Isaac and Molly became respected members of the community, their scandalous beginning fading into the past as new scandals took its place. Isaac continued to work as a guide, though he took shorter trips now so he could be home with his family. He taught Robert to ride as soon as the boy could walk, taking him up into the foothills and showing him the mountains that had shaped Isaac's own childhood. When Robert was 2, Molly became pregnant again. This time it was a girl, born on a snowy December night with hair as red as autumn leaves and her father's blue eyes. They named her Sarah, and she was as feisty and fearless as her mother. The years rolled by in a blur of happiness. Isaac finished the house he had promised Molly, building it on a piece of land he bought in the foothills with a perfect view west. It had big windows just as he had sworn, and Molly would stand at them every evening and watch the sun set over the mountains. They had 2 more children, another boy named James and a girl they called Elizabeth. The house was always full of noise and laughter, of children running and playing and dogs barking. It was chaos, and it was messy, and it was everything Isaac had ever wanted. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep, Isaac and Molly would sit on the porch and watch the stars come out. Sometimes they would talk about the past, about all the pain and loss and the strange twists of fate that had brought them here. But mostly they would just sit in comfortable silence, content in each other's presence. "Do you ever regret it?" Molly asked him one night when they were both in their 40s. "All those years we lost?" Isaac pulled her closer. "I regret that you suffered. I regret that we were separated. But I do not regret where we ended up. Every moment of pain was worth it to be here with you now. Even the war. Even the war. It made me the man I am. And I like to think that man is worthy of you." Molly kissed him. "You were always worthy of me, Isaac Anders. From the moment you jumped on Tommy Fletcher to defend my honor when we were children." Isaac laughed. "I had forgotten about that. I never did. That was the moment I fell in love with you. And I have been in love with you every day since." They grew old together in that house on the hill. Their children grew up and had children of their own, filling the house with grandchildren who climbed on Isaac's knees and listened to his stories about the war and the mountains. Robert took over Isaac's work as a guide, and James became a doctor. Sarah married a rancher and moved to California, while Elizabeth stayed in Hamilton and opened a dress shop. Molly's hair turned silver, but to Isaac, she was as beautiful at 60 as she had been at 17. He watched her with their grandchildren and marveled that this was his life, that he had been given this gift after everything. When Isaac was 65, he finally retired from guiding. His knees were bad and his back ached in the mornings, but he was content to stay home and work on small projects around the house. He built toys for his grandchildren and helped Molly in her garden and took long, slow walks in the foothills he had roamed as a boy. One evening in late summer, when the aspens were just beginning to turn gold on the high slopes, Isaac and Molly walked down to the creek where they had spent so much time as children. They sat on the bank the way they had decades before, listening to the water burble over the rocks. "Do you remember when you promised to protect me?" Molly asked. "We were sitting right here." "I remember," Isaac said. "I was 17 and thought I knew everything." "You kept your promise," Molly said. "You have spent your whole life protecting me and taking care of me and loving me. I want you to know how grateful I am, how happy you have made me." Isaac took her hand, feeling the familiar weight of the silver ring he had made for her all those years ago. She had found it among William's things after he died, along with a note saying it should be returned to her. She had worn it ever since, alongside the gold wedding band Isaac had given her at their wedding. "You made me happy too," Isaac said. "You gave me everything I ever wanted. A home, a family, a purpose. You are my whole world, Molly Anders." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and they sat together as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. The same sky they had watched as children, as young lovers, as newlyweds, as parents and grandparents. The sky that had watched over them through all the years of joy and sorrow, loss and reunion, pain and healing. I love you, Molly whispered. I love you too, Isaac said. Always have, always will. They sat there until the stars came out. Two old people who had loved each other since childhood, who had survived war and death and separation, who had built a life together that was better than any dream. Two people who had finally gotten their happily ever after, the one they had been promised all those years ago by a creek in the mountains of Nevada. Isaac lived to be 82 years old. He died peacefully in his sleep on a spring morning, with Molly holding his hand and the sun streaming through those big west-facing windows he had built for her. His children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered around his bed, and they told stories about him late into the night, about how he had survived the war and come home to claim his childhood sweetheart, about how he had been strong and protective and loving, about how he had kept every promise he ever made. Molly lived for 3 more years after Isaac's death. She stayed in the house on the hill and tended her garden and spoiled her grandchildren. But everyone who knew her could see that part of her had died with Isaac. She said she was just waiting until it was her turn to go home to him. She died on a summer evening, sitting in her chair by the window, watching the sun set over the mountains the way she had every night for decades. They found her there the next morning, a peaceful smile on her face, her hands folded over the silver ring Isaac had made for her when they were young. They buried her next to Isaac on a hillside overlooking Hamilton, under the aspens that turned gold every autumn. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren came to the funeral, and they told stories about the great love story of Isaac and Molly Anders, about childhood sweethearts who had been torn apart by war and circumstance, who had found their way back to each other against all odds, who had loved each other with a devotion that lasted their entire lives. The house on the hill stayed in the Anders family for generations. The big west-facing windows that Isaac had built became legendary in Hamilton, a symbol of a promise kept and a love that endured. Young lovers would come to see the house and hear the story, and they would look at each other and hope that their love would be as strong, as true, as lasting, and every sunset, when the light poured through those windows and painted the walls gold, people said you could almost feel Isaac and Molly there, together again, watching the sky they had loved so much, finally at peace in each other's arms forever. The creek where they had played as children still runs clear and cold through the foothills. The mountains still stand tall and eternal against the Nevada sky. And somewhere in the high country, in the places Isaac used to roam, there is a meadow where the wildflowers bloom every spring, where 2 children once dreamed of the future, where a promise was made and kept, where a love story began that would last forever. Years after both Isaac and Molly had passed, their grandson Robert Isaac Anders II, named for both his father and great-grandfather, decided to write down their story. He interviewed everyone who had known them, gathered up all the letters Isaac had written during the war and the ones Molly had saved, and he pieced together the full tale of their extraordinary love. The story spread beyond Hamilton, beyond Nevada, carried by travelers and printed in newspapers. It became the kind of legend the West was famous for. But unlike so many legends, this one was true in every detail. There really had been a boy who promised to protect a girl. There really had been a war that separated them. There really had been a mistake that nearly destroyed them. And there really had been a love strong enough to survive it all. Robert II published the story as a book in 1925, 60 years after Isaac had come home from the war. By then, the Wild West was fading into memory, replaced by motor cars and electricity and the modern world. But the story of Isaac and Molly Anders reminded people of a time when promises meant something, when love was worth fighting for, when a man could spend his whole life protecting and cherishing the woman he loved. The book became popular across the country. Young women read it and sighed over the romance. Young men read it and aspired to be like Isaac, strong and loyal and true. Old couples read it and remembered their own love stories, their own struggles and triumphs. Hamilton, Nevada eventually became a ghost town as the silver ran out and people moved away. But the Anders house on the hill remained standing, preserved by the family as a memorial. People would come from miles around to see it, to stand in front of those famous west-facing windows and imagine what it must have been like to love someone so completely. The creek still runs through the foothills, though Hamilton itself is long gone. If you hike up there today, you can still find the spot where Isaac and Molly used to sit, where two children became friends, where a boy made a promise to a girl, where they eventually returned as an old couple to remember everything they had been through together. And if you stand there at sunset, when the light turns the mountains purple and gold, when the aspens rustle in the evening breeze, when the creek sings its eternal song over the rocks, you can almost hear them. Two voices, young and old at the same time, laughing and talking and whispering words of love that echo through the years. I will always protect you. I will wait for you. I love you. Always have. Always will. That is the way all the best love stories end. Not with fanfare or drama, but with simple truth spoken between two people who chose each other every day for the rest of their lives. Who weathered every storm and overcome every obstacle because they believed in each other, in their love, in the promises they had made. Isaac Anders kept his promise to protect Molly Abbott from the moment he was 9 years old until the day he died. And Molly kept her promise to wait for Isaac, to love him, to stand by his side through everything life threw at them. They built a life together that was full of joy and children and laughter and hard work and the quiet satisfaction of growing old with your best friend. That is what a happily ever after really looks like. Not perfect, but real. Not without pain, but never without love. Not always easy, but always, always worth it. The mountains still stand over Hamilton, Nevada, eternal and unchanging. The creek still runs clear and cold, and somewhere up in the high country, in the places Isaac used to roam, the wildflowers bloom every spring like a promise kept, like a love that never dies, like a story that will be told as long as people believe in the power of devotion, loyalty, and a love that can survive anything. The end of Isaac and Molly's story is really just the beginning of something larger. Their children carried their legacy forward, teaching their own children about the importance of keeping promises and fighting for love. Each generation added their own chapter to the Anders family story, but they all traced their roots back to that creek in the foothills, to a boy and a girl who loved each other before they even understood what love meant. Sarah Anders, their red-haired daughter, would tell her grandchildren that the secret to her parents' happiness was simple. They chose each other. Every single day, through every hardship and joy, they chose each other. When Isaac was offered better work in California, he chose Molly and Hamilton. When Molly could have stayed with William Garrett and his wealth, she chose Isaac and uncertainty. Every fork in the road, every difficult decision, they chose their love over everything else. That lesson spread through the Anders family like roots through soil, deep and strong and life-giving. It created marriages that lasted, families that stuck together, children who knew what it meant to be truly loved. The ripples from Isaac and Molly's choice to love each other spread outward through time, touching lives they would never know, inspiring people they would never meet. When the book about their lives was published, letters poured in from around the country. From a woman in Boston whose husband had died in the war and who had remarried, only to discover years later that her first husband had survived after all. From a man in Texas who had searched for 20 years for his childhood sweetheart and finally found her. From countless couples who saw their own struggles reflected in Isaac and Molly's story and took heart that love could endure. The Anders house on the hill became a pilgrimage site for lovers. Young couples would travel to the ghost town of Hamilton and hike up to the house, and they would stand in front of those big west-facing windows and make promises to each other, to protect each other, to wait for each other, to choose each other every day, no matter what. Some people said the house was haunted, but not in a frightening way. They said if you stood there at sunset, you could feel a presence, not threatening, but welcoming. Like two old friends inviting you to sit down and share their joy. Like grandparents smiling at the young love in front of them and remembering their own. The silver ring Isaac had made for Molly, the one she wore alongside her wedding band, became a family heirloom. It was passed down through the generations, worn by Anders' brides on their wedding days as something old and something borrowed. Each woman who wore it felt the weight of the love it represented, the promises it symbolized, and most said it made them take their own vows more seriously, more intentionally. When Robert II died in 1948, he was buried next to his parents in the Hamilton Cemetery, which had somehow survived even as the town around it crumbled. The grave markers for Isaac and Molly were well maintained by the family, kept clean and decorated with wildflowers that someone planted fresh every spring. The epitaph on their shared headstone was simple. He protected her. She waited for him. They loved each other. Always. Those words, carved in granite, became as famous as the story itself. They were quoted in wedding toasts and anniversary cards. They were embroidered on pillows and painted on signs. They became a kind of shorthand for what real love looked like. Not the fairy tale kind, but the kind that survived mistakes and misunderstandings and years of separation. As the 20th century wore on and the world changed in ways Isaac and Molly could never have imagined, their story remained relevant. Because love does not change. The human need for connection, for loyalty, for someone who will choose you every day, does not change. Wars are still fought. People are still separated. Mistakes are still made. And through it all, love still finds a way, if the people involved want it badly enough. The Anders family continued to thrive long after Isaac and Molly were gone. Their descendants spread across the country, carrying their blood and their story with them. Some became doctors, some ranchers, some teachers and lawyers and artists. But they all knew where they came from. They all knew the story of their ancestor who had come home from the war to claim his childhood sweetheart, who had built her a house with big windows, who had loved her until his last breath. And they all tried, in their own ways, to live up to that legacy. To be the kind of people who kept promises, who protected those they loved, who chose loyalty and devotion over convenience and easy paths, who believed that love was worth fighting for, worth waiting for, worth building a life around. That is what a true happily ever after looks like. Carried forward through generations, rippling outward through time, changing lives and inspiring hearts long after the original story has ended. Isaac and Molly Anders were not perfect people. They made mistakes and had flaws and struggled with doubt and fear like everyone else. But they loved each other fiercely and completely. And that love created something that lasted far beyond their individual lives. The mountains still stand over the ghost town of Hamilton, Nevada. The creek still runs through the foothills, and every sunset, the light still pours through those west-facing windows in the house on the hill, painting everything gold, a daily reminder of a promise kept, a love that endured, and a story that will never truly end, as long as people believe in the power of choosing love, every day, no matter what.